In San Giovanni Rotondo, in the mountains of southern Italy, there was a man whose body was an open book. Not for vainglory. Not for spectacle. But for truth. His hands had been bleeding for 50 years. Not from a common wound. But from a stigmata. The mark of Christ etched into living flesh. This is Padre Pio. His story is not one of easy triumph, nor of resounding victories. He believed he was under attack. From invisible forces. From presences that no human eye can reach. But the true question is, do demons exist? And what is the nature of suffering when the soul doubts itself? Francesco Forgione was born in 1887, in Pietrelcina. His father, a carpenter. His mother, devout. He grew up between the weight of the earth and the weight of prayer. Francesco's adolescence was not rebellion. It was retreat. While other boys played, he withdrew. He fasted. He observed his own soul with the seriousness of a guardian. But there was something he did not expect. The priests perceived an early spiritual intensity. But also something more, nameless anguish, fear without a clear cause. What the Church would call attacks and modern medicine would call psychic vulnerability were perhaps the same reality seen through different lenses. And this is where the story takes a turn. In 1910, he became Padre Pio. And in 1918, his life began to bleed. It is difficult to describe what occurred on that day in 1918. The accounts differ, but the fact remains, his hands began to bleed. And they continued. 5 decades. Day after day. Without healing. Medicine could not explain. The Church investigated, doubted, confirmed. The people called it a miracle. But Pio called it suffering. He wrote to his confessor. These wounds bring no glory, but continuous pain. I doubt if I deserve them. I doubt if it is genuine. I doubt myself. It was faith and doubt sewn into the same flesh. What Padre Pio called attack lived on the threshold between spirit and psyche. Nights when doubt took form. Anxiety acquired weight. Fear spoke. Perhaps the demon he described was, often, his own conscience crying out. Perhaps the shadow that visited him was the part of himself that found no rest. Theology has always recognized this. The greatest battle of man is not against external spirits, but against those that dwell within. Testimonies and letters reveal that Pio suffered from extreme anxiety, deep insomnia, obsessive scrupulosity, and periods of depression. None of this diminishes his spiritual experience. It only shows that true faith does not exclude fragility. It coexists with it. If there was torment in his soul, there was also a place of victory, the confessional. There, Padre Pio became a witness to the interior abyss of others. They said his eyes read souls. That he identified unpronounced sins. That he offered words that were both wound and cure. His own anguish made him capable of embracing the anguish of others. His doubt made him merciful towards the doubt of others. His interior night illuminated the night of those who knelt before him. The demon raged, for the ground slipped away from him there. In that narrow space, hell faltered. And Pio's hidden blade was simple and terrible, the rosary. He made it sound without rest, each Hail Mary descended like a severe blow upon the night. In the confessional, the hours stretched out like a long vigil. Pio collected human failings like one who listens to echoes of battles fought within the intimate self. Absolution opened up cracks of light, but left upon his shoulders the weight of many ruins. With the rosary in his hands, the beads ran like dark stones. The repetition, cast again and again, wounded the void. No mere ornament, the rosary was a consecrated weapon, and the adversary feared it. Before the altar, the silence gained the density of an abyss. Pio celebrated the Eucharist like one passing through the forge, not seeking relief, but vigor to face the combat that never ceased. At night, in retreat, the examination of conscience became a patrol on the interior walls. He traversed the rubble of the soul, attentive to every crack through which the shadow might insinuate itself. He was a solitary sentinel, surrounded by spiritual twilight. In continuous supplication, every word rose up as a muffled cry against the void. Pio knew that trusting in himself was certain downfall. That is why he repeated his brief sentence like one who lifts a flame between darkened walls. Pray, hope, and don't worry. Worry is useless. God is merciful and will hear your prayer. Thus unfolded his existence, not a spiritual treatise, but a veiled war. Confession as deep healing. The rosary as a vigilant blade. The Eucharist as sustenance for resistance. The examination of conscience as a nocturnal guard. And prayer as the breath that sustains the soul on the threshold of shadow. It was silent proof that pain, when surrendered, can become shelter. But there were moments in the confessional when the boundary became so thin that the air seemed to hesitate. The wood, the veil, the murmur, everything lost density. And then emerged that which some ancient testimonies describe with caution, the shadow taking the form of a man, approaching with studied softness, as if seeking to hide its own rigidity. An elegant visitor, dressed with impeccable sobriety. The trousers moved like fabric touched by a wind that did not exist. The posture was too rigid. The silence, too heavy. Nothing in the face betrayed intention, nothing in the hands revealed human weight. It was the kind of presence that only those who have crossed interior nights recognize without wanting to recognize. He entered the confessional not as a penitent, but as an intruder. Not to examine his own ruin, but to measure the firmness of the one receiving him. There, in that narrow wooden enclosure, the clash occurred, not of words, but of natures. When invited to kneel, the visitor refused, not out of pain. Not out of limitation. To kneel would be to admit what he had spent all eternity denying. To bow his head would be to recognize what his pride could not tolerate. And in those refusals, his identity was revealed. The confessional, then, became an arena. On one side, the haughtiness that does not bend, on the other, the humility that chooses to bow before the silence of God. There were no thunderclaps, no flashes of light. Only the clash between two wills, the one that does not accept mercy and the one that administers it as a wound that heals. Padre Pio remained there, motionless, guarding his post. The shadow came to test the stature of his fidelity. And when the mask dissipated, when the human form dissolved like dust in oblique light, all that remained was the friar's slow breathing and the ancient wood of the confessional, the eternal witness of the battle. Not to exalt the extraordinary, but to recall that in that enclosure, not only human sins were confessed. The abyss confessed itself. The resistance to repentance confessed itself. The ancient refusal to bow, the refusal that caused the first angel to fall, confessed itself. And there, where so many sought mercy, one presence rejected it. There, where so many knelt, one figure remained rigid. There, where the light inclined to touch human misery, there was a will that preferred its own pride over forgiveness. The confessional was not just a tribunal of the soul. It was a frontier. It was a vigil. It was combat. And at the center of this combat, Padre Pio remained, silent, like one who knows that the night, sometimes, enters through the door pretending to be a man. But the shadows did not only come from outside. There were also those that moved within the house itself. Then followed the rupture that wounded the silence, doubts arose within the church itself, and authorities surrounded him, restricting his voice, forbidding him public masses and confessions. Were they, without knowing it, instruments moved by the shadow? Thus Pio discerned, yet he offered no resistance. He bowed in obedience, like one who accepts the blade that purifies and confirms fidelity. In a letter to Padre Benedetto, when his altar and confessional had already been taken away from him, he left etched the mark of the wound and the surrender. I obey without complaining. If God permits me to be treated this way, it is because He desires my good. I suffer, but I accept. The pain there united with meekness, as if his own voice withdrew so as not to exceed God's will. In another letter, he revealed the weight of this silent submission. The Lord allows me to be set aside. It is a heavy cross, but I do not want to flee from it. If the Church commands me, I will be silent. Obedience, rough like unpolished wood, became, nonetheless, the sure path of his journey. And, facing the suspicions that surrounded him, he confessed his own interior trembling. I do not know if all this is the work of God or deception. I fear it may be illusion. That is why I surrender myself to obedience, which never deceives. In this surrender there was the gesture of one who renounces himself so as not to be swallowed by the shadow, an abandonment that, paradoxically, became clarity. Perhaps Pio's greatest triumph was not mystical. It was human. Padre Pio was never painted by Caravaggio. But he could have been. Because his life is, light that tears through the darkness. Body that bleeds, soul that doubts, servant who suffers, man who does not lose faith. The blood that fell from his hands was not defeat. It was a signature. The signature of the truth that sanctity is not mastery over suffering, but the traversing of it. That faith does not nullify doubt, but walks with it. That a man can be attacked and still remain. Padre Pio did not win by the absence of wounds. He won through fidelity within them. If this narrative found an echo in your inner silence, subscribe to the channel, and remain with the flame.